Well, good Monday afternoon to everyone out there. Thank you for joining our fourth Monday coffee hour through LEAP Indiana. My name is Molly Hare. I'm one of the co-chairs for the programming committee within LEAP Indiana, and I'm thrilled that we have you joining us today for this fifth Monday due to the holiday for LEAP Indiana programming. So it's our privilege to introduce to you Gloria Priest, and she's from IU Kokomo, and she's going to be talking to us today a little bit about direct learning, in particular using Canvas tools. And so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Gloria, and thank you all for being here. Just as a reminder before Dr. Priest gets started, we are recording this session and it will be put up onto the LEAP Indiana YouTube page when it gets processed. So again, thank you for being here today, and thank you, Gloria, for sharing with us.
Thank you so much, Molly, and thank you to LEAP Indiana for accepting my proposal and allowing me to be here with all of you today. Thank you for everyone that's here, and I do have my coffee, so I'm maybe a little too much this morning after driving back from Charleston late last night. So I'm just warning you all ahead of time, a little too much caffeine. But anyway, so I'm really excited to be here, and I'm excited to share with you some of my thoughts on the online classroom. And I think of it as an online classroom instead of, online learning, or I want to think about, like, how are we replicating what we do in person and moving that over into the classroom online. And so just a little bit about me. I am an assistant professor in personal financial planning and marketing in the School of Business at Indiana University in Kokomo. And I have taught in the online environment, in the online classroom, for about 8 years. And it's been interesting. By far, I'm not an expert in any way with teaching online, but I do have quite a bit of experience. And I've went to a lot of training, and I think CTLA and CTLA departments do an amazing job at teaching us how to design our courses, how to build courses, how to organize our content. And they give us a lot of great tools to use. But what I noticed is, there's not a lot of training around learning in the online classroom. And so I started to think about, how I see learning happening in the physical classroom. And when I see students in the physical classroom, you can see that learning. And I think, all of you understand what I'm saying is you see the engagement, you see the eye contact, you see the little nods, and you don't really even think about it. It's just happening. And you also notice when it's not happening, and you see the glazed over eyes, or you can tell you've lost the students and you need to step back, redirect, and maybe re-explain. And so I started to think, like, well, how do we do that in the online classroom? How do we know when a student is slightly lost or didn't quite understand, or maybe the instructions that I gave them, they just weren't clear, and that was my fault. And so I started to think more about learning and how do we direct learning in the online classroom. So that's what I'm here today to talk with all of you about. And so hopefully you can all see my slides. And did everything change over okay? Perfect. All right. So this concern, I don't believe is just mine. I think students are also concerned that they're not learning as well in the online environment. And some of this, I think, is inflated now because of COVID. And there were a lot of us that were teaching in the online classroom prior to COVID, but then all of us started teaching in the online classroom during COVID. And so these numbers that I'm showing you now came from the 2020 Barnes & Noble College Insights. And again, I think they are most likely slightly inflated due to COVID and a lot more faculty and teachers and instructors getting into the online classroom, but regardless, there's serious concerns that students have. And so 45% of the students are concerned that they personally won't perform as well academically. 64% of students expressed concerns over maintaining focus and discipline. And I know even when I'm grading, in the online environment, the online classroom, where I'm trying to give comments and feedback, it's harder for me to stay focused for a long period of time versus in the classroom where you're talking to the students and you're more engaged. There's more of an energy there. So it's harder to stay focused and stay disciplined. 24%, and this bothered me, expressed doubts that their college or university was prepared. And 33% expressed doubts about their instructors' preparedness. So if the instructors are concerned and the students are concerned, I think we're still very early in this online learning environment and how we're constructing these online courses. And I think that there's still a long way to go, and there's a lot that we can do to improve the learning. So again, I'm not an expert. I have adopted a few techniques and using Canvas tools. And that's what I'm here today, is to just share with you some of those techniques that I see they're working. And I'm getting some really valuable feedback from the students that they feel that it's helping to guide the learning, to direct the learning. And so I'm going to ask everyone in the chat really quick, if you could change one behavior in the online classroom, what would it be? I'll just give everyone a few minutes to load up the chat. Okay, so I'm seeing engagement, interaction. What else do we have here? More engagement, reading everything that's posted. Absolutely. Intentional engagement with peers and instructors. Procrastination, that's a big one, Adam. All right, so I guess my next question is then, can we change the behavior? We know the behaviors that we want to change, but can we do that? And if we can we do that using some of these tools in Canvas? So, no, hit the wrong button. All right, so hopefully none of you are behavioral economists. Any behavioral economists here? Okay, that's good. So I'm going to back up for just a minute. In personal financial planning, which is my discipline, a lot of the theories that we look at come from the area of behavioral economics. And what we use those theories for is to direct or guide decisions that are better for the individual. Because in personal financial planning, you want individuals to plan, you want them to make choices that will benefit them throughout their lifetime. You want them to make investments. And so Richard Thaler, he is a Nobel Prize winner. He is a behavioral economist from the University of Chicago. And he started to look at some more of the neoclassical economic theories, and that are all founded in this assumption of rationality. And it's, if you look around at most, individuals, humans, we're not rational. We make a lot of bad choices on a daily basis. And so he started to, think, use that as more, with more of the behavior, and saying, people aren't making the right decisions on their own. And so he came up, he wrote a book, and the term is nudge. And so he looks at nudging as using choice architecture, and it's the design of information and how it's presented to an individual to kind of nudge them towards the right choice. So you're not really telling them this is what you have to do. It's just a subtle change that will move the individual to the right choice. And so in personal financial planning, probably the best example would be 10 years ago, 15 years ago, for 401ks, retirement accounts, an individual would go in and start a new job, and they would have to opt in to the 401k program. Even though that's what's best for them, there's financial benefit, all of that's there, they would have to still opt in. So they would have to fill out some forms. And what we were seeing is individuals weren't opting in. So they reversed it. And they said the default now is that you're in the 401k. If you don't want to be in the 401k program, here's the paperwork you need to fill out. And so just that simple reversal started to increase the amount of participation in 401k programs. And so Thaler looks at nudging as, what are some of these subtle changes that we can make to get individuals to optimize, their benefits in life, whether it's health, whether it's a financial investment, and I look at education as the same way. That's an investment that individuals are making that will benefit them over their lifetime. And so can we use this theory nudge to kind of move students, learners into the right direction? And then he also uses a concept called boost. And boost is more about empowering. And it's more about competence. And so that self-efficacy that we want students to have. And there's a lot of research that say, the higher the self-efficacy, the better the students perform. So how can we, boost and improve competence so the students feel, less lost in that online environment? And so, choice architecture, I've kind of already explained that, but that's just that practice of organizing the content. And then we jump to metacognition. And so these are a lot of concepts, but about 9 years ago, I did it was a full year faculty learning community on metacognition. At that time, I was 90% in the classroom. So I started to adopt and create assignments to improve metacognition in the physical classroom. And then I moved to online, and I never connected the two. I had these metacognition activities that I did in the physical classroom, but over in the online classroom, I was just constructing and organizing and looking at ways to, assess and present material. But I left out that metacognition piece. So I'm one of these people, I try to never take credit for my own for ideas. I pull things from a lot of other people, great people's great ideas. I pull them together and look at maybe is there a new way, a new application for all of this. And so I'm just, again, sharing this with you so you can kind of follow my thought process and how I came to making these changes in my online classroom. So metacognition choice architecture. This is just a simple illustration because I think we're all very familiar with it, even though you may not know the formal term. In marketing, I also teach marketing, and we use a lot of the same theories, only we use them more for evil, to get individuals to overconsume or do things that may not be good for them, but it can also be used for good. And so this is just, the cereal aisle. I think everyone understands, that it's very deliberate where cereal is placed, because we want the children to see the cereal, but you see the parents, they have to be much more involved to nudge the child towards the produce, because it's not being done intentionally. So this, we know this is what we know. We know that these concepts work. They've been in practice for 60, 70 years. And again, I'm just taking this and moving it to the online classroom. So what is nudging, boosting, choice architecture all have to do with metacognition? And I'm in business. We like Venn diagrams, so I apologize. But, I took, what we know in pedagogy, what we know in psychology, and what we know in behavioral economics. And, where those intersect is hopefully, where we can, change some of that behavior and nudge it towards a more positive, just habits, time, I think Adam mentioned the procrastination, more engagement. And so that's really, that's my big question, is can we use what we know to change student behavior, to improve that metacognition, to get them to start thinking and reflecting on what it is that they're learning. And if you're not familiar with the concept of metacognition, it's simply just thinking about thinking. We want students to think, about their learning process and start to understand and appreciate how they learn as individuals, because we all learn in different ways. And if we're just setting up these online courses and we're putting all of the students in the same course, and we're just expecting them to kind of all learn in the same way, it may not be as effective as what it could be. So, there we go. So here's my cereal aisle, and hopefully I'm going to just use this as an illustration of, I've taken Canvas and I've adopted Canvas as my cereal aisle. This is my tool, but I'm looking at these tools in a different way. And so whether it's a quiz or a discussion, it's can I create some metacognition learning activities to nudge students towards better decisions. So my first example is before each of my modules, and there's a lot of different schools of thought on what's best, 1 week modules, 2 week modules, are they individual chapters or not? I don't think that matters as much as the structure and making sure that your content is organized. I use 2 week modules, but before every module, when every module opens, before they start any of their work within the module, I have them assess their understanding of the learning outcomes. And so I list for this module, there's 5 learning outcomes that are specific to the next 2 weeks. And it's just a simple survey within Canvas, and they have to assess and rank their understanding. So it's one question. I also put the due date 3 days after the module opens. So even though I have a 2 week module, I have the due date of this pre-reading learning outcome survey within those first 3 days to get them to open it up and look at it. And hopefully, asking them to reflect on their understanding and really directing that learning. These are the 5 most important things. You're going to see a lot of information over the next 2 weeks. You're going to read chapters, you're going to, do some quizzes, you're going to have discussions, but these are the 5 most important things. This is what you need to do. And so this is my attempt at directing the learning for the student. And then at the end of each module, and this is where more the metacognition comes in, is it's the same. I mean, and full disclosure, I like simplicity. I go to these teaching conferences and I get so excited and so motivated. I see all of these new methods that we can adapt and apply. And then I go back and we get busy and we have our service and we have our, our regular load, and it's just, I never can find the time. And so these are really very simple and very quick tools that you can use and activities that you can put in. And once you develop one, all you have to do is go through and just change the learning outcomes for each one. And it's the same assignment over and over and over. So at the end, the post reading, I have them again rank their understanding, now that you've completed the module, and hopefully they think, it's just that moment of them saying, oh, I did learn, or I did understand. I started out as a 2 and had a partial understanding or competence, but now I feel like I'm a 3 or a 4. And so, we don't discuss, this. It's just a way to move students through those modules, to provide them with a little more structure, to provide them consistency from one module to the next, so they understand exactly, what it is that they need to be learning, and just to familiarize students with learning outcomes. This is, what you need to know at the end of this module. Hopefully you can define basic concepts such as business, product, profit, and economics. And this, I think, is an example from an intro to business course, but it does, again, help to move them towards that information. The next example that I have that I want to share with you is Muddiest Points. And so this came directly from my physical classroom, where once I had went through the Metacognition year-long faculty seminar, we had different activities, and one that I had adopted was Muddiest Point discussions. These were in-class discussions, and students were, would raise their hand, and we would talk about concepts that were the most difficult for them to understand. And they had to come in, with an example. So I thought, well, can I take that same learning activity and adopt it and adapt it to the online classroom? And I don't know, it's hard to gauge the engagement right now, even in Zoom. But if you have online discussions, you start to get repetitive answers from students, and it doesn't seem, and I think someone in the chat box mentioned more conversation and more intentional. Let me go back here and see if I can find it. Yep. Meaningful engagement with peers, more engagement. So this is where I'm hoping that there is a little more engagement, but in addition, students are asked, if you see, another student that doesn't understand something as well, can you help to explain? And so they have these Muddiest Point discussions where they have to go through, and again, it's directing that learning. We're helping the students, like these are the 4 most difficult concepts, these Muddiest Points. Of these 4 concepts, what was the most difficult for you to understand? And so they have to share that out to their group, and then go back and also discuss and help other students to understand the other concepts. And this one, I was really shocked at some of the discussions, the depth that I was seeing. And this was, again, from when I first adopted this, was a 100 level class. I was just very impressed. I mean, students were very supportive of each other, but at the same time, really giving very specific examples to try to help each other understand. And then I was able, it gave me a place where I could really jump in and like move the learning forward. I could see exactly what the students weren't understanding. I could see, you know, if all of them were struggling on equilibrium price, but it gave me a platform. It gave me, you know, a space that I could interject and come in and say, you know, you're exactly right. You know, Cynthia, this is, you know, a very good example. Thank you. You know, you may want to also think about X, Y, and Z. And before, I really didn't have that. It would be these discussions of, you know, kind of, I don't know, I'm trying to even think back to what I was using prior, but it would be kind of an application or a story problem. And after a while, you would see the students are just, you know, the same answers, and they're trying to come up with a different way to explain it. But it didn't seem as organic and as genuine. And this has helped quite a bit. And then my last example, and again, I'm hoping for this just to be a discussion when I'm done with these examples, so that we can think of maybe other ideas and suggestions and hear from all of you. But my last example is an exam wrapper. And it's close to Christmas, so I used an actual wrapper, but it's a before and after survey that I use. And I ask the students before the exam 2 very simple questions, and they have to answer these 2 questions, and it's a separate assignment listed in the module. How much time did you spend preparing for this exam? And they have to, you know, less than an hour, about 2 hours, 3 hours. Again, just a simple nudge towards metacognition, you know, to get them to think about their learning. And again, you create this one exam, you use it for all your exams and all your sections. You don't have to change anything. You can, it's there for you to use. And then the second question is, how prepared do they feel? So it's thinking, you know, inward and introspective, you know, their preparation. And my hope is that if they're not feeling prepared or just somewhat prepared, and they take that together with the time that they've spent preparing, that it stops them. And they go back and they do a little more reviewing, or they, you know, think about some of the concepts that they didn't fully understand and prepare. And then the last is the post exam. So once they have taken the exam and they see their grade, it's the first question is simply asking them, did they receive the grade that they expected? And whether or not there's, in question 2, whether or not they're satisfied. And then question 3, and this is only if it's like a midterm or there's a follow-up exam. If it's the final exam, I don't use question 3, but it's asking them, will you change how you prepare for the next exam? And then let's see here. And this is just an example of what my modules look like. So if a student opens up module 2, the consistencies there, every module will start with that pre-reading learning outcome. And then there's 2 chapters there that they would complete. They would do their homework, and then they do the Muddiest Point discussion, their post outcome survey, and then their quiz. And every module looks exactly the same. It's just different homework, different quizzes, different chapters, but the structure is the same, and hopefully it just moves the students through in a way that allows them to understand the material in a more effective way and learn. So anyway, I'm going to open it up to all of you. I'll be the first to say Zoom is a little more difficult to kind of gauge interest and whether or not everyone's following along. But are there any questions, any thoughts? Are you using anything, something similar in your online classroom? Do you think we can change behavior?
Well, we're giving you a minute to think and come up with your question.
Yes,
I do
please.
want to remind you that I put a couple links into the chat. One is for you to propose your own fourth Monday coffee hour going forward. Those submissions will be voted upon by the programming committee within LEAP Indiana. And so we're soliciting nominations. And the second one is you may be interested in participating in the book club starting in January. And so if you are, there's a registration. The 30th of November is the last date for registration. If you're a member institution, you get a copy of Radical Hope by Kevin Gannon for free from LEAP Indiana. So that's a registration link there as well.
All right, so Lamia, well, let me go back here. Okay, so Anna says she does use the weekly reflection. What tool, Anna, do you use? Is it the discussion tool? Or I guess I should ask, is it even in Canvas?
Is it easier if I talk than if I type?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you for your talk, first of all. This is it's a very good talk. So for the weekly reflection, I have it as an assignment, and they just type text. So it is on Canvas, it's an assignment where what they submit is, a paragraph. And I encourage them to tell me, what they thought, I guess they did well this week, or if there were any topics, as you were saying, where they felt like, they need more explanations and things like that. And then it's supposed to be, I always tell them it's the last thing they're supposed to submit each week, and that they cannot make it up at a different time.
Very good. Yes, I think the timing is really important because
Absolutely, yes.
I feel like the students, there's something that's happening in the online classroom that I think they just log in and it's check the box, check the box, check the box, check the box, and just move through. And so anything that we can do to get them to kind of reflect and to think about the content and their actual understanding of it, I think is important.
Right.
Okay, so Lamia said, is asking if I use before and after data of the questions at all, and give any feedback or respond. I don't on the learning outcomes or the exam wrappers. I look at the data, and I did see from one section to the next before I implemented like the learning outcomes and these other tools, that the average engagement in the class was up, how long they stayed in Canvas. I'm looking at kind of how I can organize this towards a research project. I'm not quite there yet, but there is, a difference in the time that they're spending. But the feedback that I give them and what I respond to is in the Muddiest Point discussions. And then Jennifer's asking, my courses are all asynchronous. And so I don't do any live lectures. It's all asynchronous, which I think is difficult. I don't record my own lectures. I'm not there yet. I do like an introduction and some explanation. I do live Zoom hours. And so I have students that will pop in for the live Zoom for my office hours. And so I have students that pop in for those. And then Jacob taught mostly labs during the COVID times. So how might we improve engagement in a course where they have to just watch the lab instead of actually doing it in person? Test them later. They struggle with the concepts. So what discipline is the lab? Jacob? Biology. Was not good in biology. That's a good question. Any thoughts? Anyone else in that area?
Doesn't Canvas have that ability to integrate apps like the
Mhm.
Fed app that might get you some interaction with some of those concepts, perhaps?
I do think that there's so much. I mean, it's vast, everything that's out there, all of the tools that's available. It can be almost overwhelming. I think a best practice would be to, find some tools that work really good for you and then perfect how you use those. I'm thinking with the lab where, they're watching the lab instead of doing it. Maybe a critique of, I'm not sure. So is it a video, like similar to like a YouTube?
I'm looking in my Canvas to find that link.
That app. Is it like a YouTube video, Jacob? Oh, you record yourselves doing the lab and then post it. So is the lab a lecture? Is it demonstrating?
I'll just go somewhere else in the library quick.
Thank you.
It's taking too long to type it all.
No, that's good. I enjoy the dialogue.
So it's a lab that goes along with lecture. So they're applying concepts they learned in lecture through the lab, but then now that they're not actually applying the concepts in person, they're just essentially watching us, I guess you'd say, reiterate some of the concepts, but they're just watching us do it instead of actually doing it.
I wonder if this would take some work, but I wonder if it's like some kind of a workflow or a process that you could, get the students to say, this is the next thing that should happen, some kind of pauses in between the labs. I know there's a tool where you can ask questions.
Okay.
In the middle of a recorded video. This would take some work to design, but if you had the lab and the questions would be before the action and say, what would the next step be, and choose, from 4 multiple choice or something, and then they click play again and watch and find out whether they were right or wrong.
Okay.
And I've seen something like that. I'm not sure of the tool.
Yeah, now that you mention it, when I used to teach high school full time, I used something like that once or twice, and I cannot remember what it's called.
Yes. And again, this is where I feel like if you find a 1 or 2 tools that work really well for you, stick with them and get really good at using those tools, because there's so much out there.
Yeah.
But I do think maybe the questions before. Okay, yeah. So Jennifer just kind of said the same thing. Yeah, if you make a mistake, ask them. So just to get them thinking, because if they're just watching and there's no action on their, that's required, Because I do think
Mhm.
they have to have some action in that process.
Yeah, and that's been the hard part. How do we include action in doing the stuff?
Mhm. Yeah. Do you have I'm sure you do, you're at Ball State, have a CTL or CTLA. Ours is called CTLA. I think most universities use a CTL, but, go there and ask them, how you could do that. And
Okay.
kind of maybe even if it was just 3 or 4, key areas within that lab that there was a question that they had to answer before they could continue.
Oh, good old FET Colorado. Those are some good labs.
Okay, so this isn't the tool, is it, Molly?
No, this is an app that
Okay.
links to Canvas with interaction.
Okay.
So they have different examples of interactive content, I should say. I have not
They
experimented
do have
with
some
them a
good
lot.
ones. Yeah,
Okay,
I used
great.
actually quite a few of those teaching full time. But thank you.
It does link
Yeah.
with Canvas.
Awesome.
Yeah, the online classroom, you think of, thousands of years, that we've been learning in person. And it's really only been, the past 10, 15 years that we've been kind of moving, into this area. So I feel like there's a lot of work that we need to, that can be done. And I think it's an obligation we have to our students to figure it out, and, in the spirit of continuous improvement. Any other questions? I didn't take up the entire coffee hour, but I wanted to leave plenty of time for questions, and I tend to talk fast and in the Zoom room. Anyone else have that? Or you talk faster on Zoom than you do in the classroom? It's all different.
Jennifer has a question for you in the chat.
Yes. Are there other types of discussions that you use? I've used like little mini cases and story problems, but for most of my courses now, the discussions, I've gone almost 100% Muddiest Point, because I just feel like it's so important that within each of those modules in the chapters is to pull out 3 or 4, this is, if you walk away from this module and learn nothing else, these are the 4 concepts you have to know. And I did I teased out 2 concepts a couple of years ago and looked to see if I could improve a score on an exam, and there was an improvement on the average correct prior, and that came straight from a Muddiest Point discussion.
Anyone else?
So Canvas tools, I use the discussion and the quiz and the survey tool. And the survey tool, I think, is within the quiz itself. And I just changed the type of question to a survey. And you get different data when it's set up as a survey. And I think it also doesn't mark it wrong. I thought about that. It's like, okay, you only study, 1 hour, wrong. So no, it's just, we're just asking them to participate. And I do assign small points for each one to make sure that they do it. But again, it's a small nudge. I kind of think of it as, participation points in the classroom. They raise their hand, or they we're there every day. Thank you, Anna and Serena, both.
As a campus who's moving to Canvas, I'm thrilled with the conversations today because this gives me some more insight into the application of some of the things for our faculty. So thank you, Gloria, for sharing with us today. And thank you all for participating in this change of behavior discussion. I think it will benefit all of us. So without any further questions, I want to thank you for participating in today on behalf of LEAP Indiana. And hopefully we will see you at some of the future LEAP Indiana events. So thank you, Gloria, very much. And thank you all. Have a fantastic Monday.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Molly.